Good evening, Africa. Good evening, everywhere you find yourself on the continent of Africa. My name is Professor Enoch Opoku Antwi, and as I promised, I am going to come your way this week with a very important topic: race, war, and the fates of Africa. Race, war, and the fate of Africa. So please make sure you share this because the future of Africa hinges on this presentation that I'm going to do. It's a lot of research, and you will know why we've been languishing in a lot of difficult situations in Africa. I begin with a question. Have you wondered why most African leaders come out with great ideas and promises but fail to deliver them? I will tell you the secret today with empirical evidence. We were handed with a wrong template of leadership that worked for the colonists but not for fellow Africans as leaders. The template idea started in 1925 until the famous African Survey in 1938. And that template is the technocratic development, aka the authoritarian development, designed and handed over to African leaders by the colonial masters. And then there's a second one called the benevolence autocracy of government behaving as if whatever they are doing for the people is a favor because the people do not even deserve that. That is why the cost of a single 4 bedroom or classroom block costs 3 or 4 times more than the other person or individuals building it. Don't forget it. Technocratic development and benevolence autocracy are a wrong template, and I will prove them to you very soon. Let me give you a snapshot of African ethnicity because that is the topic of our leadership talk today: race, war, and the fate of Africa. I'll begin with our race and then the wars. There are over 3,000 different ethnic groups speaking more than 2,100 different languages in all of Africa, a continent of 55 different countries. A list of conflicts in Africa are arranged by country, both on the continent and associated islands. That includes wars between African nations, civil wars within the same country, and wars involving non-African nations that took place within Africa, secessionist and separatist conflicts. There are also major episodes of national violence such as riots and massacres. Now, what are the records? There were at least 15 African countries with active armed conflict in sub-Saharan Africa alone in 2020. Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mali, Mozambique, Niger, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, and then Sudan. Throw in the coup d'etat of Guinea, and then you know we have a situation. So it seems that Africa is portrayed as either a theater of wars or workshop of wars. Let's see from 1801 to 2021, from the 19th century to the 21st century, most wars and conflicts in the land of Africa. They range from civil wars to massacres and unrest, genocide, uprisings, border conflicts, crisis, coup d'etats, election violence, resistance armies, rescue fronts, and border wars. We even had the Holy Spirit movement, a war in Uganda from 1986 to 1987, led by Alice Likwena as a resistance group to overthrow the Ugandan government with alleged God message that they are going to win. Yet that Holy Spirit movement lost. From Central Africa, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Republic of Congo, and Sao Tome and Principe, to the Horn of Africa, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Somaliland, to African Indian Ocean Islands, Comoros, Madagascar, and Mauritius, to North Africa, Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, Sudan, and Tunisia, to Southern Africa, Angola, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, Eswatini, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, to West Africa, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Western Sahara, to East Africa, which has 18 of the 55 African countries, and that includes, among others, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and South Sudan. or have witnessed wars and conflicts. Well, there are a lot of conflicts in Africa, and I think most of you should know that three of East African countries, Mauritius, Madagascar, and Seychelles, are islands. And then we have two other little countries called the French dependencies, which is Mayotte and then Reunion. Our continent population is currently 1.4 billion people. Let me talk about a few of our conflicts and wars that need mention. We have the Fula Jihad Wars of Cameroon from 1935 to 1936. Then we have the Boko Haram insurgencies. We have the Anglophone crisis, the Wara rebellions, Bush wars. We have the Toyota War between Chad and Libya in 1978-79. We have the Poo War at Congo Republic. We have the Batitela rebellion. We have the Katanga insurgency in Congo. We have the Shaba 1 and Shaba 2 wars of Congo in 1977-78. We have the Batipa massacres of Sao Tome and Principe. We have the Northern invasions, Maghreb invasions in Algeria, and then the Gambian constitutional crisis in 1967 and 70. Yes, it is a shame that from 1901 to 2021, 220 years down the lane, Africa have never stopped fighting. Well, let me talk about related challenges. There's donor fatigue, so we cannot continue to depend on other people to help us. And then energy crisis is also looming. Currently, Italy is experiencing 40% increase in electricity and energy prices. And we cannot forget the Pandora Papers, aka the Panama Papers. Millions of illegal companies, over 11 million companies, implicit world leaders, some sitting presidents and others are former presidents. Now, this is what happened with the crisis. I'm talking about the Pandora Papers. Tax loophole for powerful leaders in the world in accounts that are safe havens. And most of these leaders are from Africa. Meanwhile, we remain the poorest continent of the world. So bottom line, a politician will always hide his or her money. But is that wealth coming from the people? The answer is obviously yes. And why keep it offshore in another country in tax havens when your people, those who took the money from, are languishing in poverty? Don't forget, 2 days ago on October the 4th, what happened in the world? 7 hours of social media down, and then the owner of social media, I'm talking about Facebook, Twitter, and then Instagram, Mark Zuckerberg, lost $7 billion in 7 hours. Now, do Africa need theories? I would say yes. In his book, Economic Way of Thinking, Paul Hain talked about something. He argued that we cannot discover, prove, or even suspect any kind of causal relationship without having a theory in mind. Well, there was another study by Dave Meyer. He said that lack of proven instructional theories in course designs had led to lower measurable learning, lack of creativity, and low productivity in many organizations. And most of the things we observe with our senses in daily activities are all soaked in theories. So, theory, either through observation, discovery, or learning, is important in practical learning. Hain also said that we observe only a fraction of what we know, and the rest is flowed from the theories we hold. Hence, Africa needs the theory, but must be practical in execution. A quick background of African leaders was October 6, 1939, Malcolm MacDonald was the British Secretary of State for the colonies, and he called a special meeting on future policy in Africa. The meeting included a veteran colonial official named Lord Hailey and many notable British Africanists. Lord Hailey, even that meeting, they had a student at that time called Francis Nkrumah, who later became Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. He made a proposal at that meeting. Now, Lord Hailey proposed and formulated what he called the technocratic development as a justification for colonial rule. Do you remember technocratic development I spoke about at the beginning? That is one of our woes in Africa. Now, this led to what they call the 1938 African Survey. The idea of the African Survey went back to 1925. Now, let's talk a little bit about Lord Hailey. He proposed the idea of technocratic development, as I said earlier, as a justification for colonial rule, but also because he wanted to reduce the racism embarrassment. At that time, the British colonialists were thinking that, well, the African man was not capable of managing its own affairs. And that is why when Ghana attained independence in 1957, Nkrumah said that yes, the African man is ready to manage his own affairs because he wanted to prove that committee wrong. Now, Lord Haley worked with Lord Lugard, a longtime governor of British Nigeria. They agreed that the empire's legitimacy was going to be based on its technical ability to achieve rapid development, not on the racial superiority of the British. Now, the empire was going to present itself as a benevolent autocrat for the colonial rule. Now, I talked about this benevolent autocracy too. What it means is that anything the British government do for the colonies, they will make it as if that they are doing a favor. Now, ironically, Lord Haley's justification for colonialism and his cover-up for racism will later appeal to the anti-colonial victims of racism, the new African political leader. So when the new African political leaders also came up, they took to that autocratic ideas and then the benevolence ideas. And that, ladies and gentlemen, has been the woes of Africa. So the new African leaders found state-led autocratic development to be a justification for their own aspirations to unchecked power. The new African leader will inherit the role of benevolent autocrat from the defunct empire. And that was a critical point in the history of authoritarian development in Africa. So Africa is a continent where development ideas took shape in the West, not in Africa, at a time when Western attitude toward the rest of Africa was still racist. And this idea is coming from William Easterly in his book, The Tyranny of Experts in 2013. With such ideas, it meant that development was even discriminatory, and lack of recognition for dignity and rights of the poor Africans was seen because they were seen as passive subjects of development efforts. Do you see that happening up to now? That when government do something for you, they think that you are just a passive, object, and that all development effort is what they think they have to do for you. That was a template handed over to us from the British. When the new African leaders and their expert advisors endorsed the same authoritarian ideas after independence, of course, without racism at that time, the debate between authoritarian and free development was over. Thus, racist exploitations and extrapolations in Africa started in the 1920s. Then in 1938, Lord Haley concluded a massive survey in Africa. I've already talked about the African survey. And the survey, he concluded by saying this: future of Africans, and I'm quoting him, what Lord Haley said. He said, future of Africans, I think we can only say that the situation of the Negro in the United States, Haiti, and Liberia must always cause us some hesitation and uneasiness, unquote. Now, let me talk a little bit about the African survey. If you get a chance, go Google about the African survey in 1938 and learn what was handed over to Africans. So the idea of the African survey began in 1925. It is a 1,837-page report that came out in 1938, 3 years after they started the survey, and it was a technocratic masterpiece. Do you now understand how our technocratic system, our civil service is not working? That every time, I said earlier that if you have to build just a 3 classroom block, you have to spend 3 times more. The same template was handed over to African by our early leaders. Now, there was a racial tension between white settlers and colonial locals in Kenya, and they needed to assemble the facts so that the tension would come down. In a classical technocratic move, they avoided the question of who to do whom and to avoid the issue of rights of Africans against land grabs and exploitation. Do you remember what happened to Mugabe, Robert Mugabe, about people, foreigners grabbing lands and he wanted to give the land to his people? It did not start at Mugabe time. It started from 1925. It was a template that was handed over to us. So this study material development of Africans had a technical question that seemed to suggest that we have this and we need to implement them, even our own lands. So what do we face in Africa? We face a combination of threats and opportunity. Economic oppression will continue to be harped. The opportunity is to formulate our economic policies in a more positive light. Africans must come together on the positive image of the state leading the development agenda. And Lord Haley called us backward areas, aka backward races, in the 1935. And that is 86 years ago. We cannot continue on that path of being backward as he thought would be. And how about revising our system to enable the state give more help to development of the underprivileged areas in our communities? So let's talk about the front to attack racism. In 1940, Eleanor Roosevelt, he had a lunch with a black leader called Ralph Bunche, and he suggested to him that racism was most effectively attacked on the economic front. Yes, if we want to solve African problems, only the economic front. If we want to solve racism, if we want to solve tribalism, every problem rests on the economic front. And this was revealed to this black leader called Ralph Bunche in 1940 by a former American president, Eleanor Roosevelt. Up till now, we've not been able to face our economies. That is why we are struggling to be on the discussion table with the rest of the world. So Africans, as a race, must see the economic front as the only path to emancipate ourselves. Wars worsen our economic front, and our fate will be in shambles. I'm not too sure of the world fighting for equal rights for Africans. The experts here in Africa have also not helped our cause. Now, these are my predictions. No one predicts a third colonial occupation, but our technocrats seem to be on that path. The new administrators for our civil service are still hooked to the 1930s administrative and technical colonial development ideas, and this is very sad. African economic progress depends to a large extent upon the adoption by governments of appropriate administrative and then legislative action. So let's watch our laws too. Once we tackle our development from the economic front and then the legal front, we are halfway done. I also want to reiterate that the masses of the people take their cue from those who are in authority over them. So leadership is also another big issue. If our political and civil service leaders are reactionary, selfish, and corrupt, the masses in turn are dispirited and seem to lack initiative. So the leaders should lead by example. Now, these are my solutions. If the leaders win the confidence of the country and prove themselves to be vigorous in eradicating privilege and gross inequalities, they can inspire the masses with an enthusiasm for progress, which carries before all it the problems of economic development, which is we can solve our problem. Problems are all solvable. Let's fit the technical blind spot and be willing to pay the price of economic progress. It must be paid by the leaders, followed by the masses, the young and old, the weak and then the strong. Solutions happen from the piecemeal adaptation of individuals to new circumstances. We need individuals' knowledge over planet's knowledge. I repeat this again. We need individuals' knowledge over planet's knowledge because the individuals knows best as they become aware of solutions to their own particular problems. Individuals running their own lives are best judges of what can and ought to be done next. Now our fate is in our own hands in Africa to fight or make peace and develop. The choice is ours. We cannot continue to put political opponents into jail. It started from independence. We cannot continue to let other opponents fled into exile. We cannot continue to live in a politically polarized society where we have poverty and disease to contend with. We cannot continue to claim lineage to a tribe or a region or state or ethnic roots. We all belong to the country of our birth. Enough for the political conflicts and election violence. We only amend constitution to remain rooted in power. That must stop. We cannot continue to give jobs and contracts to individuals of our political party. It breeds corruption. I find it hard to live in a country where I cannot protest against imprisonment without trial. The people should have more power over decisions. The abuse of power is only for empty glory. It shames our families when we are no more in power. We cannot continue to beg other nations for help when we have all the earthly resources at our disposal. That comforts enemies of Africans everywhere because they think we are not capable. But I believe we are capable if we all put our shoulders to the wheel. We are tired of dictators in Africa. Worse still, successors of dictators have continued the same repressive policies and our economies continue to decline. Economic reforms have been mostly autocratic, not political or not practical. And then we are also not using common sense in solving most of African problems. Read Sir Arthur Lewis, the London School of Economics faculty in 1941, and Ghana's first economic advisor to Kwame Nkrumah in 1965, what he wrote in his book, Politics in West Africa, and you understand what I'm talking about. We don't like reading, we don't like research, but most knowledge are in books. Well, the thoughts are clear. The ultimate test of practical leadership is the realization of intended real change that meets people's enduring needs. And that is coming from James McGregor Burns. So Africa knows the enduring needs of our people, but our leaders have not produced change strategies to meet them. The challenge today is that many politicians are not prepared to handle the people's side of politics, which is change, conflict, and leading by example. And those are the leaders we need in Africa. These are some of the solutions. I read from George Washington, the first president of America, in March 15, 1783. This is what he said, and I quote him: "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray, but also blind in the service of my country." Look at how touchy this is. George Washington grew gray and also almost blind in the service of his country. How many African leaders can say this? Well, African leaders, we must be the ultimate example of service with no interest of wealth accumulation. To love, to lead, is to serve. We need a plan, a good team, do the difficult things, prize the seed rather than the banquet, have a passionate commitment to the cause, give the people a vision greater than themselves. Serve them. Be an active listener. Be self-aware, respectful, a change agent, and a manager of conflict. Be intentional in your work and plan for crucial conversations when needed. Lift up others to engage their gifts and raise more great leaders in the process. These skill sets cannot be learned solely from the book. They must be practiced daily. Well, I conclude with this. Well, a lot of people are trying to call me. Please, I am live. So let's conclude with this. In Africa, our destiny is in our own hands. God, in His wisdom, made us Africans. We cannot run away from that. We should be proud of our lineage and our roots. But we should stop fighting. We should stop tribalism, work together, and build our nation so that Africa will be respected by the rest of the world. We have all the resources and all the knowledge in Africa. All we have to do is to work together as a team and build Africa. I believe that leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand, and that is coming from John Maxwell. I plead with African leaders to touch the hearts of the people with good schools, water, health, mechanized farming jobs, accessible roads, electricity, and an affordable housing. Thank you, and God bless you.